I'm here this afternoon in San Antonio with Alice Patterson. Alice, thank you for your time this afternoon, and you're involved in a couple of different things that I would really like my audience to become aware of. Your particular organization is called Justice at the Gate. Interesting name. Tell us about it.
Well, I started Justice at the Gate in 1996 after I slammed the door on politics after 10 years in politics.
Okay.
And we started out praying for judges because judges are the key to our loss of freedoms. Prayer in schools, Bible reading, abortion, and now same-sex marriage all happen in the courts, not in the legislature. So we started this organization to pray for judges. And at the same time, we were building relationships across denominational, racial lines, because that's who I am, a reconciler. So it was combining prayer, strategic prayer, and voting mobilization, civic action mobilization.
Very interesting. So since you said 1996?
Right.
20 years. So I want to ask you to cover 20 years, but so you started with a concept. What all are you involved in now? What has the impact been?
Well, one of the things that happened is when I left politics, and I actually started Pray Texas, which was strictly city reaching.
Okay.
Then a businessman asked me to do voter registration. And so we started Justice at the Gate to combine the two, prayer and civic action. And now I've been asked by David Barton to help him start National Black Robe Regiment.
Which is another awesome organization.
It is, and it is the pastor arm of Wall Builders. And Wall Builders has been going for, 20 or 30 years, and David has done research on the Founding Fathers and the spiritual roots of America. And he teaches on the Black Robe, original Black Regiment, which the British feared because pastors were leading their congregations into the battle for independence and the American Revolution. So the British attributed their defeat to the Black Regiment. And they burned churches, they tortured pastors. A lot of people don't know that.
No.
Because they were the ones that were the soldiers in the battle for independence.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but back at that time, truly didn't the citizens look to the pastor for guidance as to decision-making with local issues and things that were going on, and to weigh it against what the Word of God says and which way should we go? So the pulpit was where people went for news.
That's true. And the pastors were up on all the issues of the day and preached about it from a biblical perspective. And David Barton uses sermons. He even uses railroads and earthquakes and all those things we don't think about. But when there was a calamity or an issue, the pastors preached on it and the people stood for it.
Yeah. What do you think caused that to now be absent from the pulpit in the majority of pulpits around this nation?
Well, I have some ideas, but I can't really tell you for sure because it's not true of everybody, because we do have some courageous pastors
we do.
that are speaking the truth. But one thing is the intimidation by the IRS. And in 1954 was the first time there was ever any curtailment of churches or other 501c3s from endorsing candidates or preaching on elections, whatever, and it was Lyndon Baines Johnson, our Texas congressman, I think at that time, I'm not sure. And he put a rider on an appropriations bill and said that 501c3s cannot endorse candidates because he was being attacked by some nonprofit organizations. It really wasn't churches, and the original intent wasn't to stop churches, but it did.
That's where it landed. Yeah.
Right. And so you have the Americans United for Church and State, for the separation of church and state, that write intimidating letters to pastors, tell them if they distribute voter guides that they're and there's a threat of their losing their 501c3 status, which the fact is, no pastor has ever lost his 501c3 status, and you don't even have to be a 501c3 to have a church.
No, and a 501c3 is not biblical. It's not
Correct.
in the Bible.
Correct.
I have to credit Pastor Mike Weaver. I don't know if you've had the opportunity of meeting him. Harper, Texas, just up the
Okay.
road, Wild Ride Ministries. He has prepared his congregation that if they ever came and knocked, they're handing it back to him, and they're behind him. They're supporting what the Lord's really put on his heart, that he is to discuss the current issues, not necessarily the candidates, but the current issues of the day and how it biblically lines up, and begin taking back the pulpit and the way.
I was in North Carolina in Raleigh last week on Thursday night, and I heard Bishop Patrick Wooden, a black bishop of the Church of God in Christ. And he was right in the middle of this mess, the bathroom bill that's going on right
yes.
now. And the governor signed it, which in government buildings, including schools, you have to go to the bathroom of the gender that you were born in. And there's been this huge backlash from corporations saying they're going to pull out all kinds of stuff. PayPal, I hope that they got their intimidation back. But he said, Bishop Wooden said, the time may come, and it could come very soon, when you're not going to get your tax exempt status. But you're still going to pay your tithes, and you're still going to give your offerings, because we're obedient to God, and we don't do this for a tax break.
Right.
And I think it's true, I know it's true, and you know it's true, that pastors are going to go to jail, or they're going to have a choice of standing up and saying no to the IRS, no to government intimidation, and yes to God. And if we do that in the days that are coming, some of us could go to jail.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of the intimidation toward the pastors is the concern or fear about losing part of their congregation over that very issue, because people like to write off that on their tax returns, and that's become a bigger item to them at times than obeying what the word says.
Well, and another thing is, because my dad was a deacon, he died a Democrat.
Bless his heart.
And part of this is partisan. When you start thinking about what the two parties stand for, and when I voted for Jimmy Carter in 1980, because I was Southern Baptist, he was Southern Baptist. I didn't know anything about issues. And then in 1984, I saw what the two parties stand for. I saw what Ronald Reagan stood for.
Yes.
And my dad would not even say Reagan. He would say, you know what your president is doing.
Oh, my.
And then he said, I can't figure out how I raised 3 Republicans. And I said, well, Dad, you raised us with your values, and the parties have changed.
That is true. That is what
Because
happened.
when I was born, the Democratic Party wasn't pro-abortion, pro-same-sex marriage, anti-religious liberty, anti-school prayer, etc. It did have the foundation of slavery, which I don't know what you do about that, but there wasn't the social issues that divided us.
Yeah.
And in churches, there are elderly deacons that are like my dad. He was a deacon in the Baptist church. He loved the Lord. He served his country, but he loved FDR. And FDR prayed on the radio with the nation about the war.
Yeah.
So I understand, and part of it is just our loyalties and the way we're brought up. We're not really educated about the two parties. We're not educated about the process. And pastors don't really teach that, because they just want to keep their church growing, and they want people happy. But
user-friendly.
That's right. So there's a price to pay, and there's a real price to pay in black churches when a black pastor stands up and starts looking like he's standing against their traditional party or the president, just talking about issues, and that's where this bishop was in Raleigh, because he
Wow.
stood for for the side of biblical values. He did an ad 4 years ago talking about marriage, because that was the issue in North Carolina. And his friends accused him of being a Republican, which he's not. He's just biblical.
Right. Yeah, there is a difference.
That's right.
And being biblical is the first thing we need to look at, and then
That's
move
true.
into the others. So, in the process of your journey over the last 20 years, I imagine you've had quite a few experiences, and I remember from hearing you speak at the Black, White, and Brown conference back in February, where you shared your story about, was it being the granddaughter? Is it?
Right.
Okay. Do you want to tell just a little bit of your background, or how that inspired you to move in this direction?
My grandfather was a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and before I was born, I grew up knowing it as a fact, but I don't remember how I found out. But it was it stopped in 1924. I don't know when it started, but they moved to Texas in 1924 when my dad was 6. And the one conversation I had with my dad about it was he remembered being at the marches. Now I know what that means because I've
Yeah.
researched. And those are where the men in the white hoods were going down the street with their lighted cross, they called it. They light the cross, which is very sad, isn't it? And all the family members were by the side of the road. It was a big parade. And Dad said he knew Papa wasn't there, but he didn't know that he was one of those men under the white hood.
Oh.
And for some time, for some of the family members, they hid it from them because there's shame in it. For others, they made little costumes for the kids, you know. But it's a part of our nation at that time because Woodrow Wilson, Democrat President Woodrow Wilson, showed Birth of a Nation in the White House, and that is the Ku Klux Klan film.
Oh.
He is the president. He was a professor, I think at Princeton. And he is the one who started taking black history out of the textbooks because he was so racist.
Oh
And
my.
at that time in our history, there were 4 million members of the Ku Klux Klan. And a little known fact of history is the Ku Klux Klan was started by Democrats to oppose Republicans, while over 3,000 black Republicans were lynched, over 1,200 white Republicans were lynched. And it was easy to figure out the black folk because they were all Republicans because Republican Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation and set them free.
Yes.
And then there was intimidation in the South through the Jim Crow laws when, and this really is political, but it's not political, when Democrats took over the Congress, they rescinded all the anti-slavery laws that had been passed, the right to an education, the right to vote, the freedom of housing. All those things were passed at the time of Reconstruction. But when the Congress passed over to be Democrat in something like 1890, then they had all the local laws of the South that were the Jim Crow laws, the poll taxes, and the literacy test, all those things. So it was a political, not just a racial thing. And you know, this is the thing that I've learned, Kat, since I've read and all these things. The biggest divide in America is not black and white. It is political. It's black Christians who are mostly Democrats and white Christians who are mostly Republican. And you can come together, because I did it in Pray Texas and in Justice at the Gate. You can come together for the National Day of Prayer. You can come together for Billy Graham. You can come together for every evangelistic outreach and prayer initiative. And you can have reconciliation on race.
Yeah.
But when you add Republican, Democrat,
The political.
it is the Grand Canyon of all breaches in America. And that's where God wants us to go. In Ezekiel 22:30, he said, I searched for a man among them who would rebuild the wall and stand in the gap for me for the land, and I couldn't find anybody. And that is the gap. That's the breach. That's where God wants us to go, because you look at America, that's the breach.
Yeah.
And the breach is a wound. It's a spiritual rupture that hadn't been healed. And it looks okay until you bump it. And we bumped it at Ferguson. We bumped it in Baltimore. We bumped it in Chicago. It's there, and God is looking for somebody to deal with it. And the only people that can is the church. But when I was in the political arena and field director for Texas Christian Coalition, I went to the Rio Grande Valley and I saw all these wonderful Hispanics that are pro-life, love the Lord, hardworking, love families, and asked the Lord to show me how to reach Hispanics, because Christian Coalition was basically a white organization. So I prayed that prayer for 3 years, and then I met Jose Gonzalez from Virginia. And I said to him, bluntly, because here was a Hispanic I could ask.
Got one.
What do I do? How can I reach Hispanics? And he starts talking to me about the Alamo. And whether you align with the Tejanos, Hispanics on the inside of the Alamo fighting for independence, or the Mexican army on the outside, the same historical event can be a cause of rejoicing or pain. And an entire ethnic group can be wounded and pass their pain on from generation to generation. At that point, the Lord slammed me with my grandfather's Klan stuff, and I didn't even know what it meant.
Right.
I thought it was being like a member of a volunteer sheriff's department. That's what you call whitewash.
Yes.
But God knew, and he broke my heart. And I had 3 Christian Coalition ladies with me, and our boss lived in Bedford, next door to Dallas, and we were in Dallas. They came over, and we got on our knees in the Harvey Hotel, and we asked God to forgive us. Forgive us for not seeing. Forgive us for being insensitive, not the overt hatred. None of us hated anyone. Right. But it's like they were invisible. And God wanted us to see each other. He wants us to see color.
Yes.
He doesn't want us to be colorblind.
Right.
Because he loves color and he loves diversity.
Sure does.
And we should embrace it and honor it and get to know each other. Invite them to our home. Pray together, love each other. So that started a journey for me. And I said, Jose, what do I do? He said, why don't you hold meetings with Hispanics with no agenda but to listen, which never happens in politics.
Yeah.
So we found 25 Hispanics that nobody different people asking friends, who do you know? We met in San Antonio at the Marriott Riverwalk. And I asked Jose, what do I do? And he said, share your heart. In the meantime, God had opened up Isaiah 58 to me. And I had read it with my race glasses on. Cry aloud and shout. Tell my people their sins. They love the nearness of God. They love praise and worship. They love to fast for their own agenda. But this is the fast that I've chosen, to loose the bonds of wickedness and let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke. And those from among you will rebuild the ancient ruins. You'll raise up the age-old foundations, and you'll be called repairers of the breach, restorers of streets in which to dwell.
Wow.
So if we could repair Ferguson and restore the streets, that would be it would be the Lord. And John 17, his last prayer, said, when we're one, the world will know.
Oh. Yes.
And I was thinking of that. Where was the shooting in the black church? It was South Carolina.
I believe so. Yeah.
And CNN, the whole world was watching that, and they were all touched by it. And the world does know. They pay attention when there's unity. They pay attention when there is genuine forgiveness, and that's what it's going to take for the world to know.
And when that shortly after Sandy Hook or something like that, and they were comparing the two, and And the diversity of the difference in how people reacted with forgiveness, and the other one,
Right.
yeah, it spoke volumes. Spoke
And
volumes.
that led to other meetings with Hispanics. And I remember one in Odessa where a Catholic priest shared that when he was in the 5th grade, he was sent to the principal's office and spanked for speaking Spanish. He said, they didn't realize they were punishing me for my identity, for who I am.
Wow.
When you hear stories of real people,
Uh-huh.
and now with this immigration talk, this hard line against Hispanics, well, some of them may be all right, and they're rapists, and they're murderers, and we know Hispanics, most of them love the Lord, and are hardworking, and will work 3 jobs to stay here and keep their kids in school.
Yeah.
And it's just, the enemy is trying to divide us in every place, and politics is a
That's so
great
true.
place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that one breaks my heart.
Oh.
And that could get us real off topic if I went on down this.
Well, that just means we have another topic for another day, right? Lots to cover, for sure. Well, tell me more about the Black Robe Regiment. What goes on there with, as you said, David Barton is the founder. What does that consist of?
We started in 2014, and we're being very strategic because we're small.
Sure.
So we worked in 7 swing states in 2014. Swing states that were key to the general election. We didn't get involved in primaries. And what we did was build relationships with pastors across racial and denominational lines. So we do things in Spanish. We have special meetings for black pastors where David Barton teaches his American history in black and white. I share my testimony so that we can just give a safe place. We have black worship leaders where we have the presence of God. We have acknowledgement that racism is alive and well and a sin against God's heart. Then we have David Barton sharing his American history in black and white, and amazing history of black heroes in America that we don't know about.
They were already out of the textbooks when you and I were in school.
That is true.
So it's a tragedy. It's a
That's
shame
true. And
that
he
was the
keeps
case.
finding new things and sharing, and you can just see the faces of black pastors when they get the information and the light comes on.
Yeah.
We had an event in Little Rock last August, and Pastor Iverson Jackson is a 53-year-old awesome black pastor, retired lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he was our host. And we had this event, and we had other speakers besides those, and Mark Gonzalez sharing what's happening today and what you can do. And 3 hours after the meeting was over, Pastor Iverson took some equipment to the car, and the pastors were still on the parking lot in small groups, talking to each other. And I said, he came in, he said, "It's amazing, Alice. Pastors are still out there talking." I said, "Well, what are they talking on?" He said, "Their faces are beaming. The light has come on."
Oh, isn't that fabulous?
Same thing happened in
Yeah.
Wichita, Kansas in February. And the bishop there, the black bishop, said, "Folks are telling me we had no idea. We had no idea."
Yeah.
And you know, in some pro-family organizations, they've written off the black community because they, like I once thought, that black folk are liberal because of the party they support 91, now 95, 96% of the time. But it's not true. They're the most pro-life, traditional
Yes,
marriage,
that's right.
school choice, all those things that we support, religious liberty, they are the strongest on it. But it's harder because it's relationships. You don't just go in like, white pastors like teaching, you know, they like cerebral stuff. So you go in, you give them a lot of new information, they're all excited. But in the black community, you have to build bridges to go there. You have to earn the right to speak, and you have to build trust to realize we're not trying to make them Republicans, we're trying to make them biblical. They're already biblical in their thinking and in their values, and now we move it over to biblical in voting, and National Black Robe Regiment provides nonpartisan voter guides. And not only did we work in those 7 states, but we have worked in cities where the so-called non-discrimination ordinances were
Yes,
going on.
yes.
So we were victorious in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and in Springfield, Missouri,
Good.
and helping to repeal the HERO law in Houston. We distributed 5,000 voter guides in Houston, 2,000 in San Antonio to help elect Mayor Ivy Taylor. We did it in a nonpartisan way, but she's a pro-life Democrat who's the only righteous vote left on the council that voted against the non-discrimination ordinance in San Antonio. So just giving people information. And I think a lot of Christians don't vote because they don't know who to vote for and they don't align with a party. Some people do, some people don't.
But more don't today than the way it used to be just a few decades ago.
And that's true, and it's true in the black community. Many black pastors and black Americans are, well, in Texas you don't have to register by a party, but a lot of black folk are registered independent in states where you have to register. And that is a protest. That it's hard for them to be Republican. There's a lot of stigma and a lot of false information. But like today, I mean, the Republican Party is not lily white.
No. No.
So what we have to do is we have to look at the candidates. And on the local level, there are still some pro-life Democrats. In some cities, just like San Antonio, Mayor Ivy Taylor is one.
Yeah.
And when we can find those, we need to support them.
Yes.
And we also have a pro-life Democrat district attorney here who loves the Lord. He is a very dedicated Christian and he's making a difference. So we can't just vote a straight ticket. I tell people you don't need a brain for either one. A straight Republican ticket or a straight Democrat ticket. We need to analyze the candidates and vote our values.
Well, and true, and you need to know who the candidates are, and if there's a particular race or a section that you don't know anything about, just skip. You don't have to make a mark on every single
That
race.
is true. And I used to just ask the Lord to show me which one. But given my record of hearing the Lord, that's a pretty scary thing to do.
Oh, I mean, I think there's an awakening going on.
Right.
Because just what you were talking about with the pastors in these different areas, we've been doing some work in San Angelo and had a pastor's dinner and had in Pastor Charles Flowers and Pastor Steve Branson, both here from San Antonio in San Angelo. And anyway, it was a powerful evening, and it's a matter of getting the truth out there. The social media has been fabulous, but at the same time, it's also horrible because there's a lot of incorrect information, false information that's being pushed out too. And now Facebook has become one of the leading sources of news
That's true.
for uneducated voters.
And if you Google either of those, or if you Google me, you're going to find bad stuff you don't like.
That's right, because those trash media outlets, a lot of them, they work very hard to stay at the top of the Google search.
That's true.
They pay people to keep them there. So,
And when I was on the platform with Governor Perry at the response in Houston in 2011, I wasn't supposed to be there, but he asked me to go out with Pastor Jackson. So here was a Republican governor, a black preacher, and a woman. And the left started researching me, and I ended up with a full page in the National Enquirer.
oh, that's a good one. Oh, yeah, it is amazing. Well, there's lots of work to be done, but it is so encouraging to hear of yet another organization that's working to bring truth, educate our constituents and our friends and family out there as to what really is the truth and pulling off some labels and just showing things for what they really are. I appreciate the work you're doing, and we're going to have to talk again sometime.
That would be great.
We've got a lot more to cover. So thank you so much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.